Welcome to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers Podcast. Each episode will bring you conversations from business leaders and up-and-coming stars in the commercial real estate industry in Canada. Our guests will share their unique career journeys, passions, and advice on what it takes to be successful in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Highview Partners, connecting people who perform in Canadian real estate.
I'm your host, Richard Costello, and today I'm pleased to introduce Vera Liu. Vera is Director of Investments with KingSett Capital, responsible for sourcing, structuring, and negotiating the acquisition and disposition of real estate opportunities across Western Canada. Vera has over 10 years of real estate investment experience, covering the full range of asset types from office, industrial, multifamily, hospitality, seniors housing, as well as development opportunities in many of the core markets throughout North America. Vera holds a Bachelor of Commerce from the Sauder School of Business at the University of British Columbia, specializing in finance and real estate. Vera, a big welcome to you and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So Vera, in my role, I get to connect with lots of real estate professionals in various areas of the business and at different points in their careers. But I've really found that real estate investments is a popular and it's definitely a very competitive area of the industry to get into. Why do you think that is the case?
Well, in terms of why it's hard to get into, I really think it has to do with just the number of positions that are available. So if you really think about it, an investment team is usually pretty small relative to the size of, the entire real estate organization. And usually the investment team is responsible for bringing in new opportunities for the company. But once that happens, the opportunity needs to be executed and requires the attention of the development team and asset management team, and obviously in all cases the finance team as well. So as a company's portfolio expands, your execution team generally grows. But your investment team can remain fairly lean because, you're bringing new opportunity, passing on to the execution team, then moving on to the next. Now, in Vancouver specifically, I find that we might also see fewer positions than in Toronto because a lot of the larger Canadian firms, run their investment decisions out east. So, in comparison, development and asset management tend to be managed locally. So there's more roles available in those disciplines in the city versus investments where, you're kind of competing with your counterparts in Toronto as well.
And why do you think it's such a popular area of the business to get into?
Well, I can really only speak for myself and my own interest. I just find it very exciting to be involved in the front end and, the strategic and the analytical part. And, not to say, development and asset management isn't exciting, but I just find that aspect is the most intriguing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And so as I mentioned, you specialized in real estate as part of your commerce degree, but what initially attracted you to the industry? And did you always know that you'd like to work in investments in particular?
Yeah, so, my story is not very glamorous. So basically in the first and second year of my undergrad, I didn't even know what the real estate specialization even was. And, really, I didn't even know what specialization that I wanted to be in. So I ended up picking finance as I was just, going through, and it seemed like it was the option that I would have the most interest in. And then one of my university friends said, there's this real estate program as well. And, it seems like there's some overlapping courses. We can double major and, have another specialization. So I thought, super geek, and having two specializations is always better than having one. So why don't I do that? So really, it's more of a accident that I got into the program. So special shout out to my friend, Leslie Marta, who ended up also, being in real estate and picking that over with finance. So I think that really speaks to the program at UBC. And, I don't know if that's still the case, but, back when I was in UBC, I think there was only one other university in Canada that also offered a real estate program. So it's pretty rare. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to participate in extracurricular competitions and internships, and you really get a sense of what the industry is about and, the different types of jobs, and the kind of personalities that are in it, and just came out of that program really thinking that real estate investments was a really good fit for me, and a really exciting career. And within a couple of years of being in different roles, I was pretty certain that I wanted to be in real estate investments for the long term.
So for any aspiring acquisitions managers, what are the top 3 requirements in order to be successful, in your opinion?
If I were to pick a top 3, I'd say being analytical, assertive, and passionate. And I think back to, okay, well, what is it that I do every day? I'm assessing opportunities, and for the ones that I feel fit in an organization, I'm strategizing on, how am I going to secure this opportunity? And, I'm presenting to different stakeholders, who may or may not agree in my position. So, I need to be able to communicate effectively and, believe in and have conviction in what I'm bringing forth. So, I think, being analytical, assertive, and passionate really underscores everything that I do.
Vera, how have you found the role to differ with each company that you've worked for?
So I kind of box this into 2 key differences. So the first is the diversity in the actual role. So in pretty much all the companies I've worked for, I've always focused on acquisitions and investments. But depending on what organization and what's required of me, I've also worn many different hats in addition to just focusing on acquisitions and investments. So I've taken on responsibilities on the development side and the asset management side, and I'm really grateful that I've had that experience, because I think obviously not an expert in any of those sectors, but being able to understand and dabble in that a bit firsthand just helps me understand the priorities and issues that emerge post acquisitions, and helps me better assess and qualify risk and opportunities when I'm looking at things more on the front end. The second, I guess, key difference is the different investment goals of each company that I worked for. And I found it to be very, very different. For example, is the goal to create long-term wealth? Is it to generate income through, not just our investment capital, but, also fee business? Is it to generate premium risk-adjusted returns for investors? So, depending on those goals, that's going to drive a very different investment strategy. And it's also going to determine the type and the variety of opportunities that I look at.
And you're currently the Director of Investments with KingSett. For anyone that's maybe been living under a rock for the last 10 years and is unfamiliar with KingSett, can you tell us more about the company?
Sure. So KingSett is a Canadian private equity real estate firm. We're headquartered in Toronto, and we have offices in Vancouver, and obviously that's where I'm located, in Montreal as well. So we were founded in 2002 by our CEO, John Love. And since our inception, we've raised over $12 billion in equity for a variety of investment strategies. And we currently manage assets of $15.4 billion in a $18.4 billion portfolio. And we currently run 6 active funds, and each of the funds have their own strategy. And so this includes, we have our growth fund, income, urban strategy, affordable housing strategy, and our 2 mortgage lending strategies as well.
So I know that KingSett places great emphasis on the company values. The website clearly states our values-driven culture creates our edge. And I actually had the privilege of recruiting for KingSett, and in fact helped make your introduction to the group a couple of years ago. And to help me understand the company culture at the time, I was sent a little book called Who We Are, along with a handwritten note. So the book provides a simple explanation of each value, followed by bits of practical wisdom that KingSett folks have picked up along the way to help explain how the values are lived at work, at play, and at home. So I have to say, I've read that book cover to cover a few times and still have it in my desk drawer. I believe it was inspired by a collection of insights and advice entitled Life's Little Instruction Book, written by H. Jackson Brown, which was a New York Times bestseller for a couple of years. Anyway, without revealing the secret sauce contained within this book, I was wondering if you could comment on your experience so far of how these values give the KingSett team the edge.
Yeah, so our values are very, very important to us, and our core values are relationships, respect, humility, integrity, transparency, accountability, and sustainability. And it really gives and it is a foundation of everything that we do. It's very ingrained in our culture, and it's what you can expect from every individual at KingSett. I think our business partners appreciate having this consistency when dealing with our organization, and having these very, very clear guiding principles really empowers every single individual in our organization. No matter what role you're in, what level you perceive yourself to be in the organization. It empowers us to make decisions on behalf of the organization within the responsibilities that we're given in our role. And because we're so aligned through these values, each of us, we're entrusted to make the right decision because we know what KingSett should do and would do. And this allows us to be really nimble and really quick, and it gives us an edge over organizations where you might have more layers of approval. So, you aren't necessarily able to respond as quickly as a KingSetter might be able to do so.
You focus on Western Canada, but have been part of transactions in various markets throughout Canada and the US in the past. Why do real estate groups in Toronto want to be active in the Vancouver market? And what's different and unique about doing business in this city?
I think Vancouver, no matter how expensive it might seem to people outside of this market, consistently has yielded very strong growth, in almost all sectors. So when you're thinking about just basic, bare bones fundamentals of real estate, it's really, real estate really is about where does someone want to be, for living, for business, for investment. And we think about Vancouver. I mean, like Vancouver, and we hear this a lot. Vancouver is a beautiful city. I mean, our location, our physical location on the globe, and the natural amenities that we have, you just can't really replicate something like that. And then you consider our stable political system, our favorable immigration policies, established healthcare, school, transit systems, access to talent, being in the same time zone as Seattle and Silicon Valley. And it's just a great location for real estate. And, because of this, the investment space for real estate in Vancouver is just generally very competitive. So, I think the difference is you really need to have intricate knowledge of the city because you need to understand those little details. And that's going to make that extra difference when you're in competitive bid, because they'll give you the conviction to make an investment decision that someone who doesn't necessarily understand, some of our sectors as well, might not be as confident in making those same decisions.
How has this past year changed the way you think about certain asset classes?
So I think it hasn't really, I wouldn't say that it's changed the way I look at certain asset classes more than it's really reminded me why historically asset classes were priced the way that they are, because some are intrinsically riskier. And we've just had such an incredible run in Vancouver for so many years, and every single asset class, well, except for maybe retail, but I think that's a less of a COVID story than a sector that probably had to evolve to accommodate current consumer needs. But that aside, I'd say almost all asset classes in Vancouver has just seen incredible like revenue growth, tight vacancy, firing on all cylinders. And we started to assess risk differently because we see risk is there, but wow, like the market is on fire, and the probability of any downside happening is so low. And so cap rates really start to compress. And one example I can think of is hotels, where deals are trading at sub 4 caps or lower than office, and that made sense in a time where you just can't imagine how anything can happen to disrupt the hotel world. And then COVID happened. And revenue for that sector dropped substantially almost immediately. But that's what happens because hotels don't really operate on long-term fixed contracts. So, I think this year is just going to really bring everyone back to old school underwriting where you really take a hard look at downside scenarios and you make sure that you've properly priced it in and accounted for it.
You mentioned cap rates there a couple of times. Vera, like for anyone that's maybe new to real estate investments, would you mind giving us a real simple explanation of cap rates and how they work in your world?
Sure. So, I like to think of, cap rates as, I guess you can say, a yield. So, simply put, a cap rate is the net operating income divided by a purchase price. So, it is how much you expect to generate, from a net operating income from a company against how much you're paying for a property.
So is a higher cap rate seen as a better number in a scenario if you're looking to buy an office building, for example?
Well, I think a higher cap rate just means you're generating more income from it. So technically it's better, but really what that is supposed to reflect is the amount of risk that's contained. Because again, when you're buying it, you're just projecting what you think that income is going to be. So, if you're expecting a higher cap rate, it's because you think that, comparatively speaking, you need to earn more money on a year over year basis because the capital appreciation, at the end of the day, when you sell the asset, might not be as high as another asset. Because if basically you make money through real estate through, one, the income you're generating every year, and two, your capital gain, or capital appreciation when you exit out of the asset down the road. So, a combination of those two is usually what we're considering. Okay, well, we're willing to take a low cap rate because we think this cash flow is very secure, or we think that there's going to be outsized growth on the back end.
The values that we embody at Highview Partners are integral to everything we do. Be the best, do what's right, force for good, and enjoy the journey, guide every step of our process, and influence our actions and behaviours. This podcast was inspired by the value enjoy the journey, which includes building meaningful relationships within our professional community and giving back to an industry that we care deeply about.
Turning to a slightly different topic here, the topic of gender equality in the industry. So progress is being made, but I think it's fair to say that women are very much underrepresented in senior roles throughout the industry and in real estate investments in particular. So why do you think women are so underrepresented in this particular area of the business? And perhaps if you're comfortable sharing how you've navigated this world so far.
Mm-hmm. So I think first and foremost, I do have to say, in every organization that I've ever been with, like I've never felt that I was not fairly treated or not getting any opportunity because of my gender. And, I've been respected and valued for my skills. So I'm very grateful that I've had that support and it's allowed me to flourish throughout my career. But with that said, I don't think there's any question that this is a male-dominated industry. I look around at my peers, and there are very, very few females. So if I were to guess, why that is, I just think to be successful in this business, it's very much based on relationships. And it's just human nature to more easily form bonds with people that you relate to more, or people who are more similar to yourself. And often we build rapport with business and, business partners and counterparts, through activities outside of boardrooms and offices and deals. And, sometimes those activities could be perceived as more, male oriented interest. But, like you mentioned in the beginning, I do think this aspect is changing. And I do notice that there's more effort to ensure that events are more inclusive and open to everyone. So, I think we are trending in a good direction. In terms of how I've, looked at this throughout my career is, I think I just look at it as a factual situation that, there are less females and, I am in a different position and, it is a little bit more difficult for me, especially both as a minority and a female to necessarily, relate a lot, to, my male counterparts or my peers. And what I've really tried to do is establish myself through the work that I do. And it's very important for, my own personal brand, when you're working with Vera, here's what you're going to expect. And I think a lot of my relationships have been built with just transaction activity. So I've been very fortunate that I've, been involved in a lot of transactions over the years. And everyone that has dealt with me starts to get to know me through the quality of my work. And that has been more of my focus as I progressed in my career.
Well, you've certainly forged a path for others to follow, Vera. Turning to your inspiration, what's the one piece of advice you received in the early days that created a lasting impact on your career path?
Yeah, so I think when I first started, I was pretty intimidated. And, I think a lot of our career, there's, big personalities and everyone's very assertive, type A. And, as someone new, I'm often a little bit shy to speak up, or I don't think that, my thoughts are, as of quality as someone that I felt was more senior than me. So one piece of advice I think that, really changed my thinking is, don't immediately discount your thoughts and your opinions just because, you think you're new or you're the least experienced person in the room. You could, be possibly bringing in a very, very good perspective. Because, again, as I mentioned earlier, with investments, we are always looking forward. And yes, it's true, that someone who has seen more deals and, more of that history, has a bigger database to draw from. But, at the end of the day, we're still all just projecting into the future. So, you could be correct in your assessment. You might not be, but, at least make yourself heard and, have the confidence to voice that opinion.
Did you have a role model growing up? And if so, how did they influence you to become the person you are today?
I'd say, my parents probably have had the biggest influence on how I've lived my life and the person and the values that I have today. So my family immigrated to Canada from Hong Kong when I was 5 years old. And, I'm from a very, very working class family. And, my parents left, everything, like all their friends or family to move to Canada because they wanted a better future for my sister and I, and they felt that being in Canada would give us that. And they worked, very, very hard, 10 to 12-hour jobs for pretty much most of their lives to raise us and, give us good opportunities. So that's really just instilled in me, one, a very strong work ethic, and two, just to be grateful and, not take for granted any opportunities that I have. And just to make sure that I'm putting in effort. And, if I fail, that's okay. But, opportunities aren't necessarily easy to come by. And I never want to look back at something and say, I wasted that chance or I wasted that opportunity.
You mentioned failures there. What's the greatest lesson or lessons that you've taken from failure?
I'm generally the type that, I beat myself up a lot over failures, and that's not a good thing. And, as I progressed in my career, I've learned to really take a look at failures at their face value. You look at a failure, like what is a failure? A failure is simply when you don't succeed in doing something. But, one, it's in the past. It's not something you can change. And two, you could sometimes do your very best and still fail. So, when you beat yourself up for it, you're adding no value at all. So I think the most important thing is to learn from your failures, look forward, and make sure that you're taking actions to correct any issues, if there's any that you identified that, you think contributed to your failure.
Yeah, that's very, very good advice. Very succinct. Okay, inside of your job, what puts the fire in your belly and gets you out of bed every day?
I think it goes back to my need of not ever wanting to waste or miss any opportunities. So, I always tell myself is, my little personal goal is I don't ever want to see a deal or an opportunity happen that, I think would have been great for KingSett that I somehow overlooked or I missed it. So that drive and that goal, it just really helps keep me consistently engaged.
Okay, and when work and life gets out of balance, as it does, what steps do you take to keep your body and mind in good working order?
Well, I am a huge proponent of work hard, play hard. And as I'm getting older, that is getting much, much harder to do. I definitely don't play as hard as I used to. I'd rather sleep. But I still try not to sacrifice one for the other. Work-life balance is very important for KingSett. Like we recognize that you can't really operate at your very best at work if you're out of balance in any other aspect of your life. So, in terms of keeping my mind in check, I'm just really fortunate to have really great support from both my family and my friends. And I always lean on that social energy if I feel like I need to chat to let off steam or, go unwind in a spa. Like, I'm definitely not the kind of person that's going to bottle up a bunch of feelings and, suddenly explode. Like, I like to make sure that, I'm keeping myself mentally in balance. And, in terms of just keeping my body healthy, very ashamed to say I've actually fallen off the workout wagon a couple of years back. But for sure, I'm making a priority to get back once gyms are actually open again. Because having physical energy is basically your foundation to support, any mental, spiritual, social energy. So for sure, I can't neglect the physical energy aspect of my life. And it's a priority for me to get back on the workout wagon once I'm able to.
Oh, thanks. Very honest answer. So appreciate that. Well, what's the one thing that you're passionate about outside of work that maybe people don't know about you yet, especially at KingSett?
So I don't know if I would call this a passion more than a quirk, but I am like a bit of a total geek. So I love anime and I love comic related stuff. And I've got a storage closet at home that has a little display wall of anime figurines and Star Wars figurines. And it doesn't fit my decor. I have a very strict color scheme. So that's why it's in the closet, but I guess it's a little symbolic how I'm sort of a closet geek. So you may not know that about me.
So you open a secret door and all of these figurines kind of reveal themselves.
Yeah, you come in and you kind of have to turn and look in the closet and you're like, oh, wow, like, interesting.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, let's kind of wrap up here with 5 quick fire questions that I like to ask. So number 1, what's your favorite Vancouver restaurant?
Yeah, this one's really hard. There's so many. So, I'm actually craving Italian. I think it's because of this weather. So I'd say Tavola for today.
Most memorable live music experience?
Also very tough. But I think top of mind, probably Armin Intense.
Say again?
Armin Intense. So it was an Armin van Buuren concert.
Okay.
And it was his Intense album.
Oh, Intense album. I thought you were experiencing the live music in a tent.
Oh no, it was live.
It shows how much I'm down with the kids there. Who or what was on the posters in your childhood bedroom?
Pretty sure I went through a Leonardo DiCaprio phase, so for sure lots of Leo.
And a public figure that you have the most respect and admiration for?
I think Melinda Gates is she's truly evoking change for females around the world. So top of list.
All right, and finally, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Teleportation, so I can go travel without having to get on a plane right now and be on a beach.
And you could be at the Monday morning meetings in Toronto without.
Absolutely. I'd love to teleport and be there in person for those meetings every week.
Yeah. Vera, thank you very much for your time. It's been great to chat to you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you for listening to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast brought to you by Highview Partners, a talent search and recruitment firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. If your real estate team is looking to find the best next hire, or if you're ready to make the best next move in your career, then reach out to Highview Partners today. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at highviewpartners.ca.